Planning, Housing, and Resettlement is hereby called to order. Before anything else, I'd like to acknowledge the physical presence of Senator Robin Hood Padilla. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And other senators who are virtually present. I believe Senator Bongo is likewise online. Who else? Senator Bongo is online. So there's three senators, so we have a quorum. So thank you for attending today's hearing. Also to the resource persons present, again, thank you very much for coming. We have two items in our agenda. In our agenda for today's hearing, bills pertaining to rental housing subsidy filed by Senators Tolentino, God, Estrada, Lapid, and Revilla, and the bill filed by Senator Estrada providing incentives to private companies who undertake rental residential housing at affordable rates. I'd like to request our committee secretary to acknowledge our resource persons present for today's hearing.
Thank you, sir. We would like to acknowledge our distinguished resource persons. From the Department of Budget and Management, we have Attorney Tricia Baraan, Acting Director, Budget Information Legislative Service. From NEDA, we have Director Girly Casimiro Igtiben, Social Development Staff. From DSHUD, Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, we have Attorney Rolando Pagtolonan and Ms. Rowena Dineros, OIC Director, Public Housing and Settlement Service. From the Department of Finance, we have Ms. Annabel Magno Gumimpan, OIC Development Management Officer, Fiscal Planning and Policy Office. From the Department of Transportation, we have Mr. Romulo Gabriel Quintanar, OIC Chief, Rail Right-of-Way and Site Acquisition and Environment Division. From the DILG, we have Assistant Secretary Rolando C. Puno, External and Legislative Affairs. From the PCUP, we have Commissioner Andre Nicolo Garcia Tayag. Virtually, we also have representative from the DSWD. We also have a representative from the Private Developers Association, Mr. Santiago Ducay, Executive Director of Subdivision and Housing Developers Association. And from the Organization of Socialized and Economic and Housing Developers, we have Mr. Gregorio Fernand Imperial. Okay. From the DSWD, we have Ms. Amy Rose Castillo, who is attending virtually. That's all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, our ComSec. So before we start the hearing proper, the chair would like to I would like to deliver my opening statement. To solve the housing backlog, we must be more creative in finding ways to provide shelter to our homeless kababayans, even if it is just temporary. While the DSHUD continues to develop policies on how to speed up and expand the building of housing units and meet its targets, we in Congress should explore policies on how we can help the executive to meet its targets. Today, we shall discuss bills that pertain to granting rental subsidies for informal settlers that were dislocated by eviction and demolition. These bills also addresses temporary relocation for those displaced families because of natural and man-made disasters. Maabang proseso po ang dinaraanan bago tayo makapagpatayo ng mga permanenteng bahay para sa mga displaced families. Mula sa pagpili ng lugar na relokasyon, sa pagpili ng magtatayo ng mga bahay, hanggang sa final turnovers ng mga beneficiaries, taon ang binibilang. For this reason, we agree to the bills under consideration today that an interim housing program must be put in place for our people who unfortunately were dislocated. This will give them the opportunity to live in a decent shelter while they await for the completion of a permanent housing project by our government. Secondly, for the DSUD to accomplish its goal of building 1 million housing units per year or 6 million units by the end of President Bongbong Marcos' term, it would need the involvement of the private sector. We are lucky that the private sector is very active in building houses, helping our government give home to the Filipinos. The DSUD needs all the help it can get from the private sector. In today's committee, we shall also discuss a bill that proposes the grant of incentives to private corporations who engage in the business of building rental residential housing. We want to know how we can further entice them to engage in building houses, especially for low to middle income families. There must not be a period wherein the family awaiting the completion of a government housing project do not have a place to stay, whether it be permanent or temporary or not, or for rent or not. I hope that this proceeding will be fruitful and contribute to our government's efforts to end homelessness in the Philippines. Thank you very much. But the bills that were filed and that will be heard this morning, yung rental housing nila is temporary housing for those that will be displaced. But I have an idea, hopefully Senator Sherwin Gatchalian will join us because I know siguro Almandicio to Valenzuela has a very successful rental housing program. So hindi lang yung pang temporary. Ang idea ko rito, I would probably file a substitute bill wherein those living in Metro Manila and urban areas will have rental housing for employees in Metro Manila. Dahil pagtapos naman kasi doon, pagtapos sila magtrabaho dito, when they retire, they will always, uuwi din naman sa probinsya yun eh. Di ba? So I think yun yung, sa tingin ko yun ang dapat nating mas pagtuunan ng pansin. No? Yung rental housing for employees living in or working in Metro Manila and our other urban areas in the country. And I think I'm hoping that yung Valenzuela model, no, pag-aralan po natin yun. Sila po yung unang-unang meron rental housing program. Meron din po kami sa San Robin Hood, meron din kami sa San Juan na medium rise in-city housing. Pero yun po talagang pinamahagi din yun. Mababa 800, 1,000 pesos lang ang amortization. But I think one area that we can really look at into is yung rental housing for employees working in the urban areas. Okay, so before we continue, let us hear from probably my colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. Baka may gusto kong sabihin.
A'udhu billahi minasyaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ako po ay bumabati muna sa aming tagapagtanggol at nagrepresenta ng mga bikers, no? Maging bisikleta man o motor. Senator JB Ejercito, amin pong sinusundan ang kanyang pagdadayet eh. Siya po ang aming talagang inspirasyon namin eh. At magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Napakaganda po nitong talakayan ngayon sapagkat hindi ko po makakalimutan meron hong isang revolusyonaryo ang nagsabi na ang pagkakaroon daw ng tahanan ng isang tao o ng isang pamilya, yun daw ang umpisa ng kanyang dignidad. Ito po napakagandang maging inspirasyon nating lahat sa araw na ito. Gawin naman ang gusto natin sa bawat Pilipino, sa bawat kababayan natin na magkaroon sila ng dignidad. Hindi dapat na kahit na tayo ay nasa kalagitnaan ng kahirapan, hindi natin dapat hinahayaan na mawalan ng dignidad yung ating mga kababayan. Kaya napakaganda po nitong mga panukala na ito, maging renta man ito o mapasa kanila yung tahanan. Ang tandaan po natin, ang taong may dignidad, doon nag-uumpisa ang pag-unlad. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. Lagi kayo sumusuporta sa ating mga hearings, lalo na mga importanteng mga issues, no? Lalo na sa pag-angat ng antas ng buhay ng ating mga kababayan. Siya nga pala, kaya ako na-inspire mag-diet mula nung dumating ka rito. Baka mapag-iwanan na kami dito. Kailangan hindi masyado. Anyway, again, as I mentioned, we have a lot of challenges, no, that we have to face. Lalo na nung siguro doon sa mga kasama nung binabalang kaso, sinusulat natin ang Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development ay 2 million pa lang ata ang backlog that time, no? 1.9 to 2 million 5 years ago. Ngayon po nasa 6 million na, napakabilis. Exponential ang pagtaas. That's why we really have to move fast. We really have to think out of the box. So sama-sama ito yung bukod sa paggawa ng mga pabahay para sa ating mga kababayan na informal settlers at iba mga employees, itong rental housing is an innovation. I think this will be very effective, especially on the urban centers. But before we continue, we would like to acknowledge Senator Bongo, who is here. Senator Bongo, thank you for joining us. Baka meron kang statement online, Senator Bongo.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair, Senator JV, Ejercito, and of course, Senator Padilla. Andiyan rin po, kanina nasa kabilang hearing din po siya. Napakasipag ninyong dalawa. My distinguished colleagues and all the resource persons in attendance today, good day. Mr. Chair, every Filipino should have a decent place to live, which they could also call home. However, proper and adequate housing has been a perennial problem plaguing the country since time immemorial. According to Habitat for Humanity Philippines, in Metro Manila alone, there are over 4 million Filipinos living in poor housing conditions, made worse due to COVID-19 pandemic and disasters. Meanwhile, the housing backlog in the country is estimated at 6.5 million homes according to the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Ako nga po ay pinapangarap ko noon, meron rin po ako na-file na bill. Sana po ay wala nang squatter sa sariling bayan. Ibig sabihin, sana po ay magkaroon ng sariling pamamahay ang bawat Pilipino. Medyo ambitious bill po yon. Sana po ay magtulungan ng gobyerno at ang lahat na matugunan po itong backlog sa housing. Mr. Chair, I have witnessed firsthand the situation of our fellow countrymen sa pag-iikot ko sa ating bansa. Nakita rin po ni Senator Robin Padilla yan tuwing pumupunta kami sa mga nasunugan, di pa siya senador noon. Nakita po namin kung gaano kahirap para sa ating mga kababayan na sunugan, nasa lanta ng bagyo, lindol at iba pang kalamidad ang magkaroong muli ng matitirahan. Past natural disasters like the devastating magnitude 7 earthquake in Luzon and the strong typhoons that hit our country every year. Hindi natin alam kailan ito darating ay nagdulot po ito. I mean, destroyed and damaged a lot of houses and infrastructures. Taon-taon din po, napakaraming nasunugan. Kaya po nauna na natin naipasa at iniakda ang Republic Act 11589 or the Bureau of Fire Modernization Law para ma-modernisa ang Bureau of Fire Protection at makapagsagawa ng mas maigting na fire prevention campaigns. Mr. Chair, napakahirap pong mawala ng tirahan at magsimula muli sa isang iglap, mawala lahat ang inyong pinaghirapan. Back to zero talaga. Kaya naman kahit nasa simpleng paraan, dapat tumulong ang gobyerno sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng subsidiya sa mga kababayan nating apektado ng mga sakuna at nawala ng tirahan. We must offer rental subsidy for displaced families while offering them various options during the interim process of construction and relocation. Marapat lamang po na bigyan natin ang mga biktima ng sakuna ng pagkakataong makabangon muli. Kung nais po talaga nating mabigyan ng komportableng buhay ang bawat Pilipino, bigyan natin sila ng komportable at ligtas na pabahay. Nakita ko po sa kakaikot ko sa buong Pilipinas, naabot ko na po yung mula Apare hanggang Hulo. Hindi lang po Apare, hanggang Batanes po, Lindol, ilang beses na po ako nakapunta ron. Dito naman po sa Hulo, sa Basilan, mga sunog doon. Nakita ko talaga na nahirapan yung mga kababayan nating makabangon muli, no? Back to zero sila. Parati ko sinasabi sa kanila, huwag ko kayo mawala ng pag-asa. Yung importante naman po ay buhay tayo. Magtulungan lang tayo, ang gamit po'y nabibili, ang pera po'y kikitain, subalit yung perang kikitain ay hindi po nabibili ang buhay. A lost life is a lost life forever. Kilala naman po ang Pilipino sa pagtutulungan. Ngunit kailangan pa rin po natin tulungan mula sa gobyerno. Kaya po itong rental subsidy, sana po'y maipasa po ito para bigyan man lang sila ng kahit na anong halaga o kalahating halaga ng renta ng matitirhan nila habang hindi pa sila nakakabalik sa kanilang mga pamamahay. Sa isang hearing din po ngayong araw na ito, isinulong ko rin po yung mandatory evacuation center. Konektado po ito rito dahil tuwing nasusunugan sila, wala silang komportableng evacuation center. Minsan nagagamit yung eskwelahan, naantala yung pag-aaral ng mga bata dahil nagagamit yung eskwelahan, lalo na ngayon face-to-face learning na tayo. Maapektuhan po yung pag-aaral ng mga estudyante kung nagagamit po yung mga eskwelahan as evacuation center. Ngayon, going back po rito sa rental subsidy, importante po meron silang komportableng matirhan muna. May mga anak rin po itong mga nasunugan, mga nabahaan. Wala silang komportableng higaan. Minsan po, napapansin ko sa Mindanao, gumagawa na lang sila ng mga temporary tent dyan po sa tabi ng kalye. Kawawa po yung ating mga kababayan. Tulungan po natin yung mga mahirap nating kababayan. I would like to thank our chairperson, Senator J.B. Ejercito, for prioritizing this important measure. Napakalaki po ng maitutulong nito para sa ating mga kababayan Pilipino. Inihain ko po ang panukalang batas na ito na makapagbibigay tayo ng subsidiya sa renta dahil hangarin po natin na wala ng squatter sa ating sariling bayan po. Sana pagdating ng panahon, yan po ang ma-address ng ating gobyerno. Magtulungan lang po tayo. Nais po natin na magkaroon ang bawat pamilyang Pilipino ng isang maayos at disenteng pabahay po. It may be ambitious po na ma-attain natin yung walang sariling squatter sa sariling bayan. Pero sana po'y mabawasan ito sa ating pagtutulungan mula sa gobyerno. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair ng Housing Committee. Salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Bongo, sa iyong pagsama ngayong umaga at sa maraming salamat din sa iyong paghain ng panukala, no, that seeks to improve also the lives of our people, lalo na yung mga nasalanta, no, lalo na dito sa housing, sa rental housing, no, na inyo pong pinopropose. Maraming salamat. So we move on already. The chair would like to ask statements or presentations, if any, or the position of the departments or agencies of the following: DSUD, number 1, second, NHA. May NHA po ba? DSUD, isa lang, no? Laging wala itong NHA, NEDA, TBM, SHEDA, CREBA, OSDAP. So yung mga position papers lang, no? Or probably yung gist na lang po to make our hearing brief para mas mabilis, no? Huwag niyo na po, hindi niyo pa kailangan basahin yung position paper, yung pinaka-summary na lang po in the gist of and the whole idea of your department or agency's position. So first on the list will be from Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, si Attorney Rolando Pagtolonan or si Ms. Rowen Dineros. Sino sa inyo? Si Attorney muna. Sige po, Attorney. Doon po sa unang bill muna tayo. Doon po sa rental housing ng that were filed by Senators sino ba to? Dami. Tolentino, Go, Estrada, Lapid, Revilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So we, on behalf of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, we fully support the act establishing the rental housing subsidy program for informal settler families, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. But we would like to present our position paper, our comments for the eventual inclusion in the said bill. So first of all is we would like to add the definition of dislocation. This is to be consistent with the declaration of policy cited in Section 2C of the bill. The department suggests to add the definition of dislocation the phrase arising from government projects and disasters after the words eviction and demolition. So to read Section 3 definition of terms, it should be read as it refers to the state of being displaced from one place to another due to causes such as but not limited to eviction and demolition arising from government projects and disaster. Also, we would like to comment on Section 3, rental housing subsidy. The definition. It is suggested that the definition of rental housing subsidy provided in the proposed Senate bills be adopted such that the inclusion of public housing rental market aside from private rental housing be considered in order to allow informal settler beneficiaries to have options, especially in areas where LGUs are aggressively producing its own public housing projects. So as defined in Section 3.29 of the IRR of RA 11201, public housing refers to programs and projects owned and or managed by the government for the purpose of providing housing to underserved families. Also, we would like to comment on Section 4, the rental housing subsidy program as to the rate of subsidy. So we fully support that there is a significant raise of 3,500 for those living in Metro Manila and not exceeding same amount for those living in all other regions. So this is a significant raise from the original proposed amount of the Department of Human Settlements, which is pegged at 2,500 pesos per family. So we would also like to comment on the period of availment. So it is stated in the law that the period of availment would be 5 years. But the position of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development is that this would cause an abuse on the part of the beneficiaries just because they are given more time to avail of this benefit. So others may opt to wait until the 5th year before they search for permanent housing. Following this possibility, we urge that the period be reconsidered to prevent exploitation of the bill's ultimate goal of securing permanent housing for beneficiaries. So we would like to present that in a study conducted by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies and the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, the final report cited, among others, that the actual timeline for project completion for smaller and medium-sized areas between 1,000 to 3,000 housing units is between 1 to 2 years for developer-constructed approach, compared to 2 to 3 years for incremental housing approach. Thus, accordingly, it will be more conservative if the rental housing subsidy contract with the informal settler beneficiaries be limited to 3 years rather than 5 years. But we also note that there can be certain delays or unforeseeable or unforeseen delays. These unforeseen delays are caused by, such as but not limited to the following: delays in obtaining permits or approvals from the local government units, such as the development permits, shortages of materials, equipment, or labor due to unexpected demand or supply chain disruptions, changes in the design or scope of the project that result in addition, planning, approval, or construction time, unanticipated legal or contractual disputes that must be resolved before construction can proceed, natural disasters or extreme weather events that damage or delay construction efforts, unforeseen financial challenges such as unexpected changes in funding or economic downturns that impact the availability of resources for the project, other unexpected factors that are beyond the control of the housing project team or the families that are affected. And most of all, since we are in the time of pandemic, of course, that would also affect the construction of the houses. And we also would like to comment on Section 5B under Senate Bill numbers 170, 192, 463, 1076, and 1091, the criteria for the eligibility provided under Section 5, which requires the informal settler beneficiaries to have a source of livelihood or have at least one member of the household gainfully employed, is very much recommended by the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. To be adopted considering that assistance by the government is only half of the rental fees, which an ISB should regularly pay to the lessor. Thus, by requiring that a beneficiary of this rental subsidy has a source of livelihood or has at least one member of the household gainfully employed will secure the ISB's continued lease agreement with the lessor until such time that the permanent housing is already available. pertaining to the need to vacate the informal settlement area under Section 5, in which the ISBs are presently living, and transfer or relocate to a safer area. This is the department, or the DSUD is highlighting this as an important provision which must be strictly implemented once the bill is passed. The very reason why the government is extending this rental subsidy is for informal settlers, families to immediately vacate the informal settlement area just because they are danger areas, in order to avoid any delay in the implementation of government infrastructure projects and or to safeguard individuals living in danger areas, both as result of natural and man-made occurrences. We would also like to propose an additional criteria for the selection of the beneficiaries. So the DSUD recommends the inclusion of the following criteria for the selection of beneficiaries. First of all is that the beneficiary families must have been identified and included in the list of the local government unit concerned, initially identified for relocation due to the government infrastructure projects or living in danger areas, and had not been a recipient of any shelter or housing program of the national government. And we also would like to comment on Section 7 as to the form of payment, and Section 9 as to the additional positions and personnel for the DSUD. Considering that the proposed bills provides that the form of payment of the rental housing subsidy be distributed by the DSUD, it is imperative that additional positions and personnel for the DSUD be included in the bill to ensure proper and appropriate implementation of the program. So under Sections 7 and 9 of the various House bills are complementary, such that the magnitude of the task involved in effectively implementing the program in a nationwide scale entail not only funding for the program itself, but enlistment of additional personnel who will mainly perform functions and responsibilities under Section 8 of the bills, including the distribution of subsidy as provided under Section 7 thereof. As to the roles of the government agencies, as to Section 8, the role of LGUs as partner of the implementing agency of the rental housing subsidy program should be strengthened. They should serve as the primary collector and custodian data of potential informal settler beneficiaries and register of lessors. And this should be submitted to the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. More so, with the finality of the High Court's ruling in the Mandanas case, the LGUs would be more equipped in doing and contributing their share for the success of the program implementation. So we highlight this, the important role of the local government units in the program. And also as to Section 8, Mr. Chair, the term listahan should be listahanan, or the NHTS PR, which is an information management system that uses empirical methods to compile a database of who and where the country's poor are. As to the appropriations, Section 10, considering the immensity of the rental housing subsidy financial assistance, which the department is mandated to distribute to eligible beneficiaries, the measly budget allocated to the primary national housing government agency responsible for the management of housing, human settlements, and urban development will definitely serve as a limitation to fully address all informal settler beneficiaries who will avail of the said program. Thus, the department believes that adequate funding will enable it to successfully implement this very commendable government assistance in the form of rental housing subsidy. On a final note, the rental housing subsidy bill, once enacted into law, will not only institutionalize the rental housing subsidy as an alternative housing modality and strategy to address the housing needs of the country, but will hasten the government's approach to the growing need for adequate housing in well-planned communities. However, the department would like to reiterate its recommendation to our able legislators to craft the entitlements under the proposed bill in a manner that it explicitly states that the same is distinct and separate from other sources of entitlements, such as those provided by the Urban Development and Housing Act, or RA 7279, as well as the Republic Act 10752, and to include a provision where there is mechanism that will ensure parity of entitlements among affected families who might be receiving safeguards from official development assistance. The department is truly grateful for this opportunity to convey its comments and position on the recommendations to the proposed bill, Mr. Chair. That would be all.
Thank you. Attorney Roland Pagtulon-An. So ang ano lang ng ano, the estimate of the issue, if I just want to clarify, for 2020, kung 358 households at 3.5 per month, that's about 9,694 million 843. Tama ba? 9.7, almost 9.7 billion din, no? Iba yung ano natin. Anyway, just the estimates, sige, Ms. Ma'am Rowena Dinero.
Sir, in the last committee hearings, both in the House and the Senate, we have submitted actually during the deliberation that time with Senator Tolentino, we have submitted like 5% only of the total 3.7 million households or the informal settler families. We have an estimate of like 8.2 billion pesos for as a requirement, having 5% of the informal settler families as an indicative measurement of those that would be affected in case of there would be a displacement due to major infra projects of the government or displacement due to calamity or disaster, Mr. Senator.
Medyo malaki rin pala, no? 9.6 billion. So this will be subsidy only, no? Walang housing dito. Just to be an assistant, parang assistance for rental. Ito yung talagang idea ng mga bills, no? Na doon sa mga displace or calamity, for them to have assistance for temporary housing while permanent housing is being built. Okay, so we take note of the position of DSUD. Next will be NHA. Meron mga ano, NHA dito. Anyway, construction arm kayo ng ano eh. Sige, any position?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. The National Housing Authority supports the aim of the said bills and submits the following comments. NHA recommends the provision of SB 192, wherein the rental subsidy shall be granted for a maximum of 5 years or upon availment or acquisition of permanent housing, whichever comes first. There are many factors outside of government control that can lead to delays, as enumerated by DSUD earlier. And to be mandated to shoulder the rental subsidy extension may compromise the budgets of and work programs of NHA. And these are also outside the scope of the housing programs under our GAA. We also recommend reviewing Section 3 of said bills, which defines the term dislocation, as it does not seem to be used anywhere else in the said bills. That would be all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just submit your official position paper. Thank you at, for coming. Next will be Neda. Meron dito bang Neda?
Yes,
Ma'am, Director Gurley. Pakita. Si Miro. Igtiben. Ma'am, sige po. Your agency's position.
thank you, Senator JV, and also good morning to Senator Bongo, who is online. NEDO will submit its official position, but I'm going to give the preliminary comments that we have. NEDO recognize that not all families, especially those in the bottom 30% of the income decile, cannot afford to build or even buy a house. Hence, the public rental housing would be a viable option as NEDA sees it. Hence, we also support providing rental subsidy that will help the bottom 30% of the income decile. But we would like to emphasize that the PDP is pushing for establishing livable communities, hence housing units should be of quality. It should have the minimum health, it should follow the minimum health standards, it should be accessible, it should be culturally appropriate, it should be resilient to climate and disaster, it should be energy efficient with green spaces, and there are options for active mobility. It should adopt innovative technologies, And also, we would like to emphasize that it should follow the minimum standards as set in the Batas Pambansa Building 220 or BP 220. Second, the housing rental subsidy that should be jointly determined by DSUD and NEDA can be revisited and revised not more than once every 2 years. We also would like to propose the inclusion of the homeless in the list of the possible beneficiaries. We would also like to support the registry of lessor and beneficiaries, but we would like to recommend that only one agency would solely manage the database for all these eligible beneficiaries, lessors, inventory of eligible residential rental housing units, suitable areas for housing projects, ready for occupancy resettlement housing units, among others, and that should be the DSUD. We would also like to note that the DSWD's NHTPR or the listahanan will eventually be transitioned to the community-based monitoring system based on the current law that was approved. In terms of the amount of the rental subsidy, we are proposing to provide rental subsidy of around 3,900 for the NCR and 2,900 for areas outside NCR. This is based on our computation from the latest Family Income and Expenditure Survey 2021, and we assume that 30% of the monthly income in NCR and regions outside NCR will be allocated to housing expenses. Hence, this range of proposed rental subsidy. In terms of the eligibility, we would also like to propose that the eligibility criteria includes, of course, must be a Filipino citizen, must be an underprivileged and homeless citizen, must not own any real property, whether in the urban or rural areas, and must not be a professional squatter or a member of squatting syndicates. We would also like to seek some clarifications on how the eligibility criteria on the daily cumulative income of the eligible families will be verified, especially if most of the beneficiaries are under informal labor markets. These provisions can be seen in the proposed Senate Bill numbers 170, 463, 1076, 1091. We would also like to propose that the bills be harmonized into one substitute bill. That's all for NEDA, Senator.
Thank you. Director Gurley Casimiro Igtiben, probably will hear from DBM and DOF also kasi I think what will be crucial in these measures are the funding, no? Kasi medyo malaki rin, no? I think sa estimation DOF lang data, parang 26 billion, no? We'll see. Okay. So next, we'd like to ask from DBM, Attorney Tricia Baraan, also regular here.
Yes po.
Sige
Good
po, ma'am,
morning po,
your
Mr. Chair.
department's position.
Apo. Good morning po, Mr. Chair and Senator Bongo. At first, we recognize the intent of the bill to provide housing for dislocated families, among others. However, we respectfully request the NHA and the other implementing agencies to ensure that the funding provision for the program should be prudently planned, considering the targeted outputs and outcomes for a particular year vis-a-vis the available funding, subject to the usual budgeting process and available fiscal space. We also take note of the comment of the DSUD on the role of the LGUs in the implementation of this program, which will be considered in the evaluation of the devolution of programs of the DSUD and NHA. And finally, Mr. Chair, due to the fiscal space, we suggest to put a cap on the timeline when the rental subsidy will be provided. Nevertheless, sir, we will also provide our official comments on the bill, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you, Attorney Tricia Baraan. Actually, pareho yung yung concern ng DSUD. I think dapat talaga magkaroon ng timeline, no? 5 years might be too long. And in my experience, alam mo, nag-chief executive ako, talagang prone to abuse to. marami dito kahit na meron na. Talagang tingin ko, siyempre sabihin nila, kahit na meron ng housing provided, sabihin wala pa. Kasi that's renta. Tama, I think yung 2 to 3 years probably will be the, we'll see. Tingnan natin sa TWG. I think 5 years is too long. Also, I agree. No, sabayin. Next, for DOF, Ms. Annabel Magno Gumimpan, ma'am, your department sa position.
Good morning, Senator JV and Senator Bongo. We will also be submitting our official position paper, but let me give you our initial comments. The Department of Finance acknowledges the intent of the bills to enable our informal settler beneficiaries to lead decent lives and to support them in accessing the formal housing market. However, we are raising the following comments for the consideration of the committee. As what has been previously raised by DBM, the proposal would entail significant costs to the national government. And based on our initial estimates, actually po, the bill is unclear as to whether the proposed rental subsidy is going to be given on a monthly or annual basis. So based on our initial estimates, the number of households of potential ISFs based on PSA's annual poverty indicator survey is around 801,281. Kung ibibigay po natin yung subsidy ng 3,500 monthly, this will incur about 2.8 billion. And total annual expense would be around 33.65 billion. So that's very big.
The estimate is about 33.
Kung ibibigay po natin yung 3.5 billion monthly
Yes.
sa ISBs natin,
33 billion.
33.65 billion po for 1 year.
Wow.
Kung-
Quite a lot.
Kung yung 3.5 po will be given to them on one time lang annually, 2.8 billion po ang estimate namin.
Medyo malaki po, no?
Malaki po talaga.
That's even bigger than the budget of DSUD. Di ba? Mas malaki pa sa budget. Baka mas marami tayong mapagawang babahay. Di ba? Anyway, please continue.
If really necessary, the proposed subsidy should be sourced from the DSUD budget without requiring additional monetary allocation. As what you have previously raised, Senator JV, without identifying corresponding revenue sources to fund the proposed allocation, it would be more difficult for the government to finance urgent programs and priorities, adding more pressure to our limited fiscal space. And the funding requirement for the proposed measure can also be used more efficiently on existing housing programs of the government that directly address the housing needs of ISFs and other low-income groups. These include the following, among others: high-density housing program by the Social Housing Finance Corporation, community mortgage program, CMP, also by the SHFC, which is a people-led housing and finance community development program that assists legally organized associations of low-income groups to acquire and develop a tract of land under the concept of community ownership, and housing and resettlement programs by the NHA for ISFs. Tapos po, we would also like to comment that critical to the success of a housing subsidy program are transparent housing subsidy policy, effective identification of beneficiaries, and effective nationwide information campaign. Knowing the actual beneficiaries as well as the agents bearing the burden is important in designing efficient and effective housing subsidies. We propose that ISBs be supported by better targeted subsidies through the budget, which is more transparent and accountable. To this end, we will enhance the current social programs and use the national ID system to improve the targeting of our beneficiaries. Thank you for soliciting our comments.
Thank you. From the DOF's position, no, Ms. Annabel Magno Gumimpan. Anyway, most of the sa economic team natin, no? From DBM, from DOF, NEDA. Yung concern natin is the limited fiscal space. This is really ideal, no? Medyo maganda-ganda na, but medyo medyo nakakashock din yung by the estimates of DOF that is given, that 33 billion a year. Ang inyong estimate, that's about 3 billion, 3 billion a month. Tama, no? Tama ba? Just to clarify. So we take note of that. Naano lang ako kasi I used to I defend the budget of the issue eh. It's even bigger than the department's whole budget, di ba? So ang position ng DOF might parang you can use it to CMP and other housing projects. But I think we can siguro we'll just probably can adjust, no? Kasi siguro we'll get PCUPs later on kasi marami na tayo masyadong subsidy. Meron na tayong AX, meron tayong 4Ps, meron pa tayo nito. Ako kasi I have always believed in dapat di masanay sa dole out, kailangan yung tao magkaroon ng trabaho, di ba? Magkaroon ng sariling no? So we'll look into that. No? Probably we'll ask PCUP later on. Next for DSWD. Is DSWD present? Miss Amy Rose Castillo, baka online. Ma'am, are you still online? Amy Rose Castillo.
Yes, Honorable Senator, I'm online.
Sige pa, ma'am, na lang open yung video nyo. Baka kasi hindi kayo yan. Sige po, yung position po ng DSWD regarding this because it's quite DSWD will be in charge already of 4Ps, no? Ano pa ba? AX. May tupad pa tayo, lahat na So tignan natin kung kakayanin pa. Ma'am, kayo po, Miss Amy Castillo.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So the DSWD fully support the proposed bill. So we have submitted our position paper po last September 22. So the following are our recommendation. So first, the program should have a clear long-term goal for our internal for our ISF by providing a security and tenure and sense of ownership and empowerment. Second, the program should take into consideration the Public Act number 7279 or the Urban Housing and Development Act. The third is the bill may also consider the review of successful housing projects for the informal settlers implemented in the country as one of the take-off points for the post program and rental subsidy programs implemented in other countries that may be adapted in the Philippines. And next po is the full implementation of the bill should be closely coordinated by the National Housing Authority with the National Economic and Development Authority. Then the disbursement of our rental subsidy should be given to the NHA or the National Housing Authority, which is also responsible in certifying the eligibility of our informal settlers to qualify as program beneficiary. Next is the NHA to adopt adequate and advanced monitoring system to implement the program. And lastly po, next is we recommend the Presidential Commission on Urban Poor or the PCUP to implement the programs. It has the mandate and the program to conduct social preparation of urban poor families. And lastly po is to add the roles of the LCU to provide avenues for the informal settlers' participation in the implementation of the program. So that's all, Honorable Senator. That's the position paper of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Amy Rose Castillo. Tanong ko na po, di ba meron tayong emergency shelter program sa DSWD? May emergency shelter program.
Yes, sir. We have this emergency shelter program, but we'd like to inform the body, sir, that emergency shelter, our last implementation for the ESA or the emergency shelter program is until 2022 po. Since we have agreed with the shelter cluster that effective 2023, all shelter programs will be implemented by the DSUD as mandated by law.
Thank you. For the record of Emergency Housing Assistance Program ng NHA, 5,000 for rebuilding. Emergency Shelter Assistance, ito po, partially damaged, 10,000, totally damaged, 30,000. So, meron na tayong ongoing program regarding this. No? So, we'll just take note of all of this. Okay, next, the OTR, Mr. Romlo Quintanar.
Hello po. Good morning, Senator JV and Senator Bongo. So I will defer from speaking on behalf of the department. We will submit our official paper. But what I can share is the experience of the rail sector na sana makatulong. Kasi para po kaming trial run ngayon actually. So for our JICA and ADB projects, meron po kaming entitlement matrix. This entitlement matrix is reflected in the Resettlement Action Plan that is born out of the negotiation between the implementing agent and the international funding agent. Ngayon, sa RAP po, naka-reflect na doon yung rental subsidy. No? This was born out of also a gap analysis between the local laws and the international safeguards. And I know this is not the subject of the committee, but we provide the rental subsidy also for legal owners. So ano po ba yung mga cases na nagpo-provide kami ng rental subsidy to legal owners? Bukod sa current market value and replacement cost ng kanilang structures, kapag ka-urgent na kailangan ng i-turn over yung site sa aming contractor, nagpo-provide po kami ng rental subsidy for them kapag hindi pa po napaprocess ng DOTR yung payment for them. Tapos, ang second instance naman po is kapag dangerous na to the project-affected person, kapag may safety and health considerations na. So, sa kasalukuyan po, meron na kaming 6 na legal owners na nabigyan ng rental subsidy na may cap ng 15,000 for 5 months worth 450,000. For our informal settler families, other than the relocation and the replacement cost, meron din po kaming option for them na kung ayaw nila dun sa pabahay, gusto nila mag-self-relocate, they are entitled to 5 months worth of rental subsidy. Tapos yun na yung entitlement nila. But if they opt for a relocation site, tapos hindi pa po nagagawa yung relocation site, we also give them an interim rental subsidy which is based on the average rental rate doon sa city or munisipyo kung saan sila nakabase. So, kasalukuyan din, meron na kaming 8 na informal settlers na nabigyan ng rental subsidy, totaling to 132,000. So, sa kasalukuyan, dahil wala nga pong guidelines, we are working closely with DSUD for a joint memorandum circular para pag-usapan po yung mga, yung basically lahat ng parameters. Meron din po kaming monitoring clause dahil aligned sa safeguards consideration, hindi pwedeng porket binigyan kayo ng rental subsidy, okay na yon. So DOTR, together with our partner local government unit, we monitor the informal settlers kung habitable ba, decent, safe yung pinagtitirhan nila at yung pinagre-rentahan nila. And if hindi po sila bibigyan ng rental subsidy for the succeeding month. So there's that safeguard consideration. So maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Romulo Quintanar. It's nice that at least DOTR, meron tayong program for those that will be affected, specifically dun sa railway projects. No? Meron kayong pang housing option or rental habang ginagawa pa yung housing. So kung hindi nila gusto yung pabahay,
pwede rin po yun.
Gaano katagal yung 6 months na rental?
5 months po.
5 months. Of about magkano po ang binibigay natin?
Ang cap po is 15K. So depende, 15K a month times 5 months. That's the max na po.
Saan yung BGC ba yan? Parang mahal na.
Pero for our north, Pampanga, Bulacan areas, less than 10,000 po.
Akala ko Cityland lang. Mas mahal pa Cityland.
Mga 6,
15,000.
8,
Dumami na naman yan. Well, yan ang based on experience to.
Yes.
Nung mayroon ako, pag may kasunugan, ganyan, may pabahay. Yung initial na bilang, ganun lang. Pag nalaman na meron, triple na. Diba? Yun yung mga dapat batayan. We have to have safeguards. I think that will be crucial, no? Yung dapat, kung ano lang talaga yung initial bilang. Kasi it's prone to abuse Because this is also cash, no? Kasi rental to It's prone to abuse. Dapat malagyan natin ng safeguards and safety nets po ito. So thank you for sa DOTR.
Welcome po.
Next, probably PCUP na. Si Commissioner Andre Tayag. Your position po, yung agency's position.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the members of this committee. First of all, the PCUP supports all forms of assistance into homeless and underprivileged, especially policies that address gaps and hastens the process of service delivery. Created by Executive Order Number 82, Series of 1986, the PCUP is tasked to coordinate the speedy implementation of government policies and programs to the urban poor, directed by Administrative Order Number 111, Series of 1989. All concerned government agencies, departments, and offices are ordered to coordinate with the Presidential Commission for the Urban Poor and actively participate in trisectoral dialogues and activities concerning the urban poor. Duly mandated and strengthened by EO number 69, series of 2012, the PCUP is tasked to conduct social preparation, activities related to asset reform, human development, and basic services, employment and livelihood, and other programs of the government for the urban poor. In line with this, Mr. Chair, the affirmation mandates, directives, the PCUP submits the following comments on the coverage, operationalization, and especially the role on social preparation with respect to Senate Bills number 192 and 463. The comment of our commission with respect to Senate Bill number 192, page 3, line 7, with respect to informal settler beneficiary, which refers to individuals or household living under any of the following conditions. Our comment, the conditions specified under informal settler beneficiaries are also covered by Section 28 A and B of the Urban Development and Housing Act, whereby the LGUs in coordination with the NHA are tasked to provide the settlement for the administrative eviction and demolition. In keeping with the spirit of explanatory note for Senate Bill 192, the condition for ISBs should be expanded to include families and individuals that are victims of natural disasters such as typhoons, earthquakes, and man-made fire or armed conflict disasters, as well as number 2, those which are affected by court-ordered demolition and eviction. In the conduct of pre-demolition conference, the PCUP have observed, Mr. Chair, that the LGUs and the NHA do not have allocation for the housing provisions for the most cases involving the demolition and eviction of the homeless and underprivileged, wherein the timeline of eviction is largely dependent upon the release of the writs of demolition by the courts, which could take a long time. So with respect to page 6, line 7, section 8, the role of government agencies, we would like to highlight the role of PCUP, to change the phrase assist DSWD to partner with DSWD in the design of social preparation, activities, workshops, and training programs for beneficiaries, Mr. Chair. As an agency duly mandated to conduct social preparation of the homeless and underprivileged, the PCUP humbly requests to be in partnership with the DSWD in matters involving social preparation. This suggestion also cascades into the forging of formal partnership through a memorandum of agreement or cooperation. Since the PCUP is currently under the supervision of DSWD by virtue of Executive Order number 67 issued by former President Rodrigo Duterte, this would allow for clearer lines of accountability and responsibilities between the two agencies, which in turn will contribute to a more efficient implementation. Add to the role of PCUP in the conduct of social preparation. We would like to make a comment with respect to partnership with NHA as with respect to socio-economic profiling counterparts in the conduct of census and tagging. The initial step of social preparation is the establishment and validation of a reliable and comprehensive information base for community organizing. Unlike census and tagging, which deals with the physical count of structures and individuals, socio-economic profiling extracts data on income, vulnerability, and preferred housing options. Such information shall guide appropriate interventions and add to the due diligence process that will strengthen the program. To establish linkages with the convergence of concerned government agencies for the speedy and efficient implementation of the rental subsidy program. Also in keeping with the PCUP's core mandate of facilitating a convergence of government agencies to address urban poor issues, this additional task would maximize resources of the government as implementation of the program. So under page 6, line 13, the role of local government units, our comment, our suggestion to make explicit the involvement of the barangay in the implementation of the program. The local government unit, including the barangay, shall, as most data on tenurial status as well as lessors, are continually updated on the barangay level, especially in the registry of barangay inhabitants. Page 6, line 16, also under the role of local government units. The local governments, including barangay, shall partner and assist the NHA and PCUP in conducting census and taggings with respect to socio-economic profiling. of ISBs in need of immediate resettlement, as barangays can provide access to its constituents, which will facilitate conduct of census, tagging, as well as socioeconomic profiling. Lastly, for our comment for Senate Bill number 192, the local governments, including barangay, shall partner with and assist DSWD and PCUP in conducting social preparation activities. So, Mr. Chair, our comment for another Senate Bill number 463, page 6, line 22, specifically the role of the PCUP. We recommend, Mr. Chair, change the phrase jointly undertake to partner with. The PCUP shall partner with DSWD and the DLLG to take the lead in the design of social preparation plan for rental subsidy, timeline, budget, and strategies, and partner with DSWD and LGUs the conduct of implementation of the said plan. In relation to its mandate to conduct social preparation as well as being the focal point of convergence of government agencies, departments and offices in matters involving the welfare of the urban poor, the Presidential Commission for the Urban Poor humbly suggests that it takes the lead in the drafting and vetting of social preparation plan for rental subsidy program, Mr. Chair. With respect to page 7, line 5, the PCUP in program design and funding mechanism. Provided further that the shall closely collaborate with the NHA, DSWD, the LG, and Department of Budget and Management in the development of program design and funding mechanisms. On the conduct of social preparation prior to relocation and resettlement, as defined by PCUP Commission Resolution number 5-2013, social preparation refers to the series of activities designed to prepare the underprivileged and homeless families to cope with the changes brought about by government infrastructure or development projects, and to encourage them to actively participate and prepare the society, community, and personal responsibilities in their quest for tenurial security. Human development, basic social services, employment, livelihood, and other government programs for the urban poor. This includes their participation in the conduct of dialogue, meetings, or community assemblies, organization and identification of volunteers respected by community people, coordination with the local officials, validations of lists of affected families, discussion and presentation of need assessment, survey, action planning for the eventual relocation and other activities. Time and again, the Philippine government have implemented its socialized housing program under modalities of off-site and in-city resettlement projects only to find different results from the intended outcome. The 2015 Housing Summit, organized by the Philippine Congress, concludes that between off-city and city resettlement, off-city resettlement undeniably involves higher economic costs, and not only on the part of the government, but more so in the side of already impoverished resettled families who also have to endure the social cost of relocation. Likewise, while in the city resettlement is a promising anti-poverty approach, off-city resettlement, due to its inherent inadequacies, does the opposite by worsening the poverty situation at both the family and community levels. Social preparation makes active partners out of informal settlers, families, beneficiaries through community organizing, community development. This elicits genuine participation and community plans of action. These key activities ultimately pave the way for informed choices as regards resettlement options, off-site, in-city, or community-initiated. Strengthen social capital and income-generating activities through realistic and grounded ventures into social enterprise. Resettlement action plans, another output of social preparation, shall ensure smoother transition from sending to receiving LGUs. Such factors contribute to minimizing the risk of resettlement, such as decrease in the household income, inadequate basic and social services, the general failure of beneficiaries of the government social housing programs to amortize. Within the context of the proposed House bills, Mr. Chair, members of this committee, the PCUP, well within its mandate and with ample budgetary allocation, can capable undertake social preparation activities for the informal settlers beneficiaries as they transition into the formal housing program of the government. Our recommendation as to the implementation, the PCUP as the lead agency and mandate for social preparation, it should be understood that one of the objectives of social preparation is to identify the beneficiary through census and tagging. Socioeconomic profiling and formulation of beneficiary selection, arbitration, and award committee, known as BASAC, Further social preparation is to capacitate the beneficiaries to access government program. Furthermore, as part of social preparation is to link the beneficiaries to the program. After identification of beneficiaries and the possible lessor, whom the beneficiaries identified, the PCUP will forward the list to our mother agency, the Department of Social Welfare Development, for disbursement of check and to be issued as the reference for preparation of the beneficiaries to their formal and permanent housing. The PCUP we will request for additional personnel and appropriation of funds for the conduct of social preparation. And lastly, our recommendation, all agencies, especially LJUs and barangay, shall work hand in hand with PCUP for identification of beneficiaries. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Andre Tayag, no? Anyway, siguro what will be crucial here, ang worry ko lang because of, as reported by our financial institutions here, departments, yung limited fiscal space natin. Kung pwede natin tulungan lahat, bakit hindi, no? Pero medyo naalala ko sa sa estimate masyadong malaki, no? 33 billion a year that can be used already for housing program, housing projects na talaga yan, no? Tapos siguro pwede na take note niya siguro Commissioner Andre, paano kung yung isang pamilya may tupad na, may 4-piece, may AX, tapos idadagdag pa natin to. Gusto natin tumulong pero we want to spread out yung assistance ng gobyerno. Hindi pwedeng sa isa, sa selected. So probably ito yung dapat natin pag-aralan. No? So, probably take note of that. Kasi sa dami ng mga subsidy that we are giving out, di ba? May tupad na, may 4-piece, may AX, may rental housing na naman. So we want to spread it out di ba? Kung pwedeng mas marami ang mag-benefit, mas maganda. So probably yun ang dapat natin pag-aralan and we'll take note of how we can, paano kung member na sila. Probably siguro pwede mas mababa ng konti kasi nakakatanggap na sa gobyerno. Kasi we will deprive others also in need, di ba? Yung mga talaga may kailangan din. Hindi naman natin kayang tulungan lahat So dapat if we can give as much as possible to as many families, yun ang concern ko lang dito. Kasi gusto natin makatulong talaga. But then again, ako dito kasi ang policy ko ever since we envisioned the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, is really, yun nga, dapat talaga mabigyan natin pabahay, no? In fact, doon sa program ng DSUD, dapat walang libre, no? Para umikot yung pera. Diba? Kahit na mura lang, 500, 600, 800, 1,000 pesos na payment, amortization, at least it can be used to roll para makapagpagawa pa ng projects. So that's our aim in DSUD. Okay, so probably since there are no more, we take note of all the positions of the different agencies for these particular measures, no? We take note of that. Again, I will be filing a separate bill na lang po kasi masyadong magkaiba. Yung sa akin kasi yung rental housing for employees. I think that will be more effective for urban centers. Siguro pag-aralan natin yun sa DSUD, look at the rental housing program of Valenzuela. Kami po, yung sa San Juan, ginawa namin yung in-city housing, pero yun kasi amortization niya. Pero yung I think very practical and I think it will be more attuned to the times. I'm thinking of filing a bill on rental housing na for Metro Manila, Cebu, Davao especially. Marami dito transients, nag-employees nag-employed here. Pero after they retire, they will really go back to their roots sa provinces So I think magandang pag-aralan natin. Aside from the housing program of DSUD under Secretary Acosar, siguro magandang pag-aralan natin yung rental. Hindi pag-aralan, but we also give priority to rental housing in highly urbanized metropolis, Metro Manila, Cebu, Davao. Okay? So I'll be filing a separate bill for that. Siguro papatawag din namin kayo later on. At least nasimulan na natin. Okay, so we now move on to the next bill filed by filed by my brother, my kuya, the veteran. Sa kanya itong bill to provide incentives for those who will be engaging in rental housing. So we will get the position of DSUD, NHA, NED, of course, ang pinaka-importante, NEDA, and the developers who are there, HEDA, CREDA, OSHDAP. No? Of course, we want to give incentives kasi gusto nga natin i-encourage yung mga developers to go into the housing program. No? Especially now under Secretary Jerry Acuzar, malaking factor if-factor in natin yung mga private developers as well so that they would go into housing and rental housing. Kaya lang, tignan natin kung ano sasabihin ng DBM, ng DOF at NEDA kasi medyo may mga incentives na ito eh. So pag incentives kasi medyo allergic sila dito. Okay, so we acknowledge the presence of Mr. Toti Carino of CREBA. Yan ang ating katulong dito sa pagbuo ng DSUD. Nakatapos na natin sa rental housing, so sakto po. We move on already. Siguro we can ask SHEDA, OSHDAP, and CREBA, yung mga developers muna, on your position on this particular measure. Sino ba mauna? SHEDA muna.
Okay.
Sa Santiago Dukay.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I am Sunny Dukay, the Executive Director of the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association. SHEDA is one of the leading organizations of housing developers, and we have been helping the government in addressing the country's housing need. And Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senators, Senator Bongo and colleagues in the housing industry, we are grateful and honored that we have been invited to these important deliberations. And with reference to the rental proposal, Mr. Chairman, SHEDA would like to take cognizance and support the good intentions of the bills on rental housing. And we believe that this is an effort that will augment the existing program of the government with respect to addressing the country's housing need. However, Mr. Chairman, we would like to make the following manifestations. Number one, we suggest that the efforts with respect to rental housing be attuned also and be consistent with the objectives of the 4PH or the Pambansang Pabahay para sa Pamilyang Pilipino, because this involves also the participation of the local government unit, the private sector, and the communities themselves. Second, Mr. Chairman, we have been cracking our heads and there were concerns on the table with respect to the budget that will be necessary, but perhaps in the determination of prospective beneficiaries, we can classify into different categories of the beneficiaries of the rental housing. One, perhaps the families who are in transit. We said that they are waiting for a formal resettlement area. Second, those who are living in danger areas and who are into the identified areas which endanger their lives, those in the waterways, those in areas that are prone to landslide, and those that will be affected by government infrastructure projects. A third classification perhaps would be those needing housing because they do not have yet access to the formal financial institutions. And fourth, perhaps, are the homeless themselves who we find on the streets. So in classifying the different beneficiaries, we would be able to prioritize and perhaps allocate the necessary budget. Second, or third, Mr. Chairman, it is also important that we humbly suggest the determination of the prospective beneficiaries. There should be a template, the demographics, the economic characteristics, their location, and other pertinent data, so we would know the specific participation of the different agencies and the private sector. And Mr. Chairman, we also humbly suggest that there should be a system and methodology of qualifying beneficiaries. We should learn from the good experiences of San Juan, of Naga, of Valenzuela, and perhaps also the experience of the DSWD and their poor peace, so that we can weed out and prioritize the real and intended beneficiaries. Fourth, Mr. Chairman, is that there should be, when we have determined already the budget, we should also determine where we will locate or where are the structure or units that will be needed to be rented out. So saan po ba ito? It is also important to identify where we will locate these families that we have identified. Fifth, we appreciate also the efforts, most especially the incentives that the government provides or will provide for the private sector participating in these very good efforts of addressing the country's housing needs. Specifically, we would like, the SHEDA would like to suggest that efforts of the private sector be quantified also, and that this be allowed as compliance to the balanced housing requirements, and perhaps be extended corresponding tax holidays in accordance with the incentives being extended by the BOI and DTI on the SIPP, the Strategic Investments Priority Program. And we appreciate this very much. And again, we commit the participation of SHEDA and the private developers in this noble activity, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sani Dukay. So you touch already on the first bill and second bills, no? Salamat. Oh, thank you po for your position. Next for OSHDAP, Mr. Gregorio Imperial.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senators Padilla, Senator Go, to all the key agencies here present today. My name is Fernand Imperial. I'm a board of director for OSHDAP, and I'm here to deliver a very short position paper from our organization. Good morning. The Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developers of the Philippines, we extend our appreciation to this committee's invitation for us to participate and submit our position to discuss Senate Bill numbers 170, 192, 463, 1076, and 1091, which provide for a National Rental Housing Subsidy Act. As an organization of developers committed to providing decent and affordable housing to Filipino families, we express our full support for the aforesaid bills. We respectfully submit that while a rental subsidy may not be a permanent solution to the unending housing crisis and may not provide Filipinos tenurial security, it will definitely complement and expand the government's efforts to ensure that homelessness and underprivileged families, including those living in the danger zones and informal settlements, are provided a roof over their heads. Further, we respectfully submit to the committee points of clarification and inputs regarding the bills. Number one, we concur with Section 10 of the proposed bill, which specifically provides for appropriations or source of funds for the implementation of the program. The provision states that the amount necessary for the effective implementation of the Act shall be charged against the current appropriations of Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, DSUD. However, we wish to emphasize that the current budget of DSUD would not be sufficient to efficiently implement the Act. Hence, a review of the department's appropriation and other key shelter agencies implementing the program shall be conducted to ensure the effective rollout of the programs. In addition to this, number two, we concur with Section 9 of the proposed bill on mandating the DSUD as the lead agency for the program tasked to create additional positions and enlist additional personnel in the implementation of the program. We suggest that funding for the operation and administrative expenses of the intended new positions must be ensured in the department's appropriation. Number three, we wish to suggest as well as the inclusion of a provision that would directly disburse the subsidies to lessors, provided that the latter comply with the qualifications set by law, as well as in conformity with the contract agreed between the lessor and the ISB, informal settler beneficiary lessee, and to comply with the non-eviction rule as set by the proposed law. Number four, aside from the criteria set for the eligibility of the informal settler families availing the program, we propose criteria must also be crafted based on the lessor's property to be rented. This is to secure the beneficiaries decent living conditions while ensuring that government subsidies are spent appropriately according to their value. And lastly, the bills should also consider that when computing the amount of subsidy to be provided to the ISBs, it ought to be at par with the current minimum wage and the market rent in highly urbanized areas. This will provide agencies with an estimate of the number of target beneficiaries vis-a-vis the fund allocated for the program. With the foregoing proposals, the organization reiterates its support for the immediate passage of the proposed measure as a continuing effort to address the overwhelming housing backlog. We look forward to engaging with your committee and the Senate with regard to the development of this proposed legislation. This has been signed by our President, Paolo Giovanni Olivares, and our Chairman of the Board, Mars Mendoza. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gregorio Fernan Imperial. Now we go on to again to the yung sa mga antos first bill that they also covered. Now we go to the incentives, no? So they should muna siguro. They should NHA, then DOF, DBM, and NEDA. And then also we go to the developers after. Meron bang ang they should? Attorney Roland or Mrs. Rowena?
Good morning.
Additional incentives for those who will engage in rental housing.
Good morning once again, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mr. Chair, we still have to collate our comments and the position paper for this bill, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, Mr. Senator, Your Honor, since 2020, during the second year of the DSUD, Mr. Chair, Secretary Del Rosario then came up with the issuance of a department order. Basically, this is in reference. Kanino yun? Di sa akin. This is in reference to the mandate of the DSUD, particularly on Section 20.3 of the RA 11201, which is basically espousing on the formulation of programs, policies on rental. And also, this is embedded in the enhanced Philippine Development Plan of 2017 to 2022. As an offshoot of that, Mr. Chair, the Secretary then issued a department order on the creation of the public rental housing as alternative secure housing tenure, Mr. Chair. So there's this technical working group created, and basically this would the proposed bill would form part of this discussion on the rental housing, and we appreciate very much the issuance or the furtherance of this proposed bill in Senate, particularly addressing the rental housing and, of course, the incentives for the private developers that would be involved in this. In fact, members of the TWG, Mr. Chair, are SHEDA and the CREBA and the other developers group. So we could get their position on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just submit your position paper regarding this measure on granting of subsidies and incentives for rental residential housing by the private sector. So we go, before we go to the developers, siguro itong mga financial agencies natin, no? DOF, DBM, NEDA. Kasi medyo matatakas yung mga incentives are tax exemption from VAT, value add tax, any local government taxes, tax credit of 25%, gross rentals for 5 years, contractor, developer, professional fees. So medyo marami. So alam ko allergic ang dyan, ang ating finance agency sa mga incentives, no? But we'd like to hear the position siguro. Unahin na natin DOF. Lalo na ang DOF talagang marami na raw incentives, di ba? So this will be additional. So ano po ang position nyo?
Senator JV, we are also still collating our data, but we would like to make a comment on the VAT exemption because the proposed VAT exemption we deem that the proposed VAT exemption is no longer necessary since the train law already provides VAT incentives for the housing sector, which will eventually provide relief to residential consumers. And to it, beginning in 2021, the VAT exemption threshold for the sale of house and lot and other residential dwellings is 3 almost 3.2 million, and VAT exemption threshold for the monthly lease of residential units is now at 15,000 pesos po.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Annabel Magno Gumimpan for DOF. Pero ano nan, actually, we anticipated that already. Pero ano naman, I think we take note of your position, no? Because there sa train actually meron na rin may mga ano na rin, incentives, so to speak. Next, DBM or NEDA, if any, Attorney Tricia Baraan.
Apa. Good morning po ulit, Mr. Chair. We respectfully defer to the DOF on the tax exemption and credits, but we also take note that if there will be tax exemptions, it will definitely affect our fiscal program po. Thank you.
Thank you. So in other words, you're not in favor because it will affect our fiscal space. Ika nga, it will, again, yung limited fiscal space at of course, DBM needs it for to fund the programs of government, especially this administration. Next, NEDA, Ma'am Girlie.
Yes, Senator, good morning again. In terms of the incentives for rental housing, we suggest harmonizing the suggested incentives with the provisions in number 1 in RA 7279 or the Urban Development and Housing Act or UDHA of 1992, which already articulated mechanisms to increase private sector participation in socialized housing development for the underprivileged and homeless citizens. So it also includes exemptions like on project-related income taxes, capital gains tax, and VAT. Also, we have the 2020 Investment Priorities Plan, or IPP, which enjoins government agencies and entities to issue necessary regulations to ensure the implementation of the Investment Priorities Plan. Mass housing is included already in the list of preferred activities for investment in the 2020 IPP and the 2022 Strategic Investment Priority Plan. This means that investors for mass housing will be able to already enjoy incentives such as income tax holidays, enhanced deductions, and a preferential 5% corporate income tax rate. Mass housing covers, we note, the development of mass housing units and in-city low-cost dwelling projects for lease or rent, especially for Metro Manila. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Director Girlie, representing NEDA. Now we go to the developers, of course. Sino ba mauna? Si Mr. Sani Dukay again of OSDAP. SHEDA pa, sorry. Hindi ako nakasalamin. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just want to put forward with respect to the apprehension of our government partners on the extension of incentives to the private sector. Honorable Chairman, I would like to point out that housing also has been used by many other governments to pump prime the economy. There are more than 85 industries attached to housing. For instance, cement, steel, materials, roofing materials. I can enumerate more. When somebody puts up a house, then there are corresponding needs as well. So there are many industries that are attached to housing that would generate economic activities. Second, the multiplier effect attached to housing is some 3.14%. Our colleagues from the government, NEDA in particular, would know about this, that really housing can pump prime the economy. Third, very important, Mr. Chairman, is that housing provides employment to the people. So a house would need at least 14 man jobs. So if there is a good activities in housing, it can address almost 5% of the total employment requirement of our country. Fifth, Mr. Chairman, housing cuts across all the other housing needs, all the other needs of the people. there are studies that would show that a good housing would also provide or affect a good health of the people. So there can be savings from the government, of the government, on the health needs of the, it has also effect on peace and order. And more, of course, it adds to the quality of the population that can be utilized for productivity. So these are the positive effects. There are also some unquantifiable effects of housing. So maybe the government should also consider that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sani Dukay of Sheda. Next, probably we can ask OSDAP, and then last but not the least, si Mr. Toti Carino of Creba. First, Sir Gregorio Fernand Imperial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding our reaction to that particular point, I'll defer to give a formal reaction na lang po to our team. Thank you.
Thank you. We just wait. The committee will just wait for your submissions. Mr. Toti Carino for Creba. Yung po tungkol sa incentives for private developers who will enter into housing, yung rental housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm very thankful that CREB has again been invited to participate in these deliberations. We support the initiative to look at this particular situation on rental housing as an intervention on the growing housing deficit. We would, however, submit formal written specific comments on the particular provision, Mr. Chairman. If I may digress a little, I'd like to have a little comment on the previous bill that was deliberated. There is an existing bill right now that is being proposed in Congress, wherein the Balanced Housing Act, under the incentivized ladder system, be allowed to be deposited to the local government unit. I think this housing rental program may be included in that as a source of funding. I hope this can be deliberated soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we take note of that. Thank you, Mr. Toti Carino, for you're correct. It's already included as incentives sa Balanced Housing Act. But anyway, we'll just try to consolidate everything here. So with that, again, we'd like to thank everybody for coming, all the resource persons for hearing these two bills. But again, I would like to reiterate that I think we have to prioritize more on the housing programs, no? Sa programs. And I think yung rental housing kasi, Postoti, yung rental housing which has been successful in Valenzuela, I think I would like to file a bill on that. So mag-prepare na lang DSUD, our housing agencies concerned, PCUP, on that, and I will file it na those living in Metro Manila, Cebu, Davao, yung mga metropolis natin, we will also prioritize rental housing for those employed here. Kasi pagtapos nun, uwi rin na probinsya pag-retire. So I think it will be a good, parang yan I think Singapore or other countries has rental housing, no, yung mga metropolis talaga. Okay? So again, thank you very much for all those agencies who are here, our resource persons, mga developers, PCUP, for the information, everyone. All the bills considered today will be referred to the TWD. So this hearing is hereby adjourned. Thank you very much.